Hey there, folks. Boudros here, back with another Q&A session. Sorry, hasn't been as on schedule as it was there for a minute, but just kind of had some things come up, and I was commentating the San Diego Materia Cup. Go check out the stream if you haven't. It's a fun time. Or at least I enjoyed myself, but I was also commentating it. So as always, if you have a question you want asked for the show, feel free to leave it in the YouTube comments with a little Q&A tag so I know it's for the show. Or you can message it to me on Twitter, Discord below. All that. Pretty short one this week. We've only got 4 questions, but we've got some really good ones, and so I should have some lengthy answers for that. And look forward to later in this week, hopefully having a video come out with Ghoul02, Daniel. He was in the top 4 of the San Diego Materia Cup, so going to do a little recap with him. I mean, we're buddies anyway, but should be a good time. Anyway, let's get on with the questions. Kurjan asks, what do you think is the weakest color at the moment, and what can be done to bring it in line with the others? Very, very good question. I always love talking about the elements. The elements of the game very much fascinate me because it's really what gives, I think, the game its most flavor and diversity in its styles, right? You know, that fire should act differently than lightning, and lightning should act differently than ice, and ice should act differently than earth. So as far as the weakest, I guess it depends how you look at it. So let's clarify my parameters for this for right now. So I don't think you can look at it on a card-by-card basis because, for example, my answer to this is going to be Lightning, but Lightning has good cards, right? X-Death is clearly a good card. Man in Black, clearly a good card. Now, granted, I've always said those are kind of like Earth cards in disguise, but so Ixion is a Lightning card, right? It outright breaks forwards. That's one of Lightning's big abilities, and it's a really good card, especially as things get cheaper. Ixion is awesome, so Lightning has good cards, just like any of these decks have good cards, but do you see a lot of mono Lightning? No, not so much. So for the parameters of this question, I'm going to be talking about mono exclusively. So for example, I don't think mono Ice is that great, but Ice Earth is a lot stronger, or Ice Fire, you know, where you get the combination elements kind of help offset some of the weaknesses of the elements. So specifically thinking of mono for the framing of this question, obviously, Mono Water is very good. Mono Wind is very good. Mono Earth doesn't really have a prominent tribal. It used to be Monks. No one really plays that. But Earth has so many good staple cards like Shantoto, like Tyro, Kusith, that... And again, you don't normally see it in Mono, but so many of those are splashable and so strong. I just can't pick Earth. What does that leave? Ice. Ice is definitely one of the weaker ones, again, as a mono element, but I think Fire and Lightning right now are struggling the most because even those kind of those are the ones that kind of struggle to get splashed into other things. You know, Ice is still splashed into things, Earth is as well, but the other two, Fire doesn't get the vote because it has Amaterasu. And as long as, I can't imagine how this game would look where Amaterasu is actually a bad card. Essentially, they'd have to stop printing auto abilities. Everything would have to become an action ability or a field effect or just some other brand new ability that, you know, Amaterasu doesn't affect. Because as long as auto abilities, and specifically under the battlefield, are as prevalent, surely Amaterasu cannot go away as a card, right? So that's Fire's big mainstay. So Lightning. Why is Lightning weak? I mean, in theory, it has useful tools, right? Haste is a great keyword. Doling forwards is a great way to get pesky blockers out of the way. And outright break is arguably stronger than damage-based removal, especially because there's a lot of stuff that's immune to damage-based removal, and as forwards get higher and higher power, you need more and more damage to get rid of them, whereas the break is just break it outright, who cares? There's not as many forwards that have the can't be broken outright clause. There's a few, but not nearly as many, or at least not any prominent ones. So maybe the issue is that a lot of that stuff is combat focused, which again, as the game goes on, it tends to be less and less combat focused. And Lightning does tend to have some weird restrictions on it. Like, look at the Ramu from the summons from, they were this set, right? Opus 19, that the Ramu is this, okay, you free cast if a Lightning Forward entered, but it deals 8,000 damage, which is fine, especially if it's for free, but it's got to be 3 or less. It's the only one of those free summons that has a restriction on what the target could be. Also, Lightning just hasn't had a lot of great legends, universally good legends. Again, X-Death can kind of go anywhere. He's a good one. But the Black Waltz 3, he's got to work with the Black Waltzes. Ishtola, good card, has to work with the Scions. Nyx, good card for Kingsglaive, has to work in Kingsglaive. Hooded Man, you can't just slam Hooded Man into any deck. You can't take a single copy of Hooded Man and put it like an X-Death. Like even a single copy of X-Death can give a deck a new dimension that it may not otherwise had, but Hooded Man requires you to play extra Hooded Men. So a lot of their just like pure Lightning Legends just tend to have a lot of just weird cost to them. Why is Ixion good? Because Ixion is just 2 cost, instant speed, break all the 2 costs on the field. That's just a generically good card that you can slap anywhere. So I think that is what it's suffering from, is honestly just a handful of good cards. I think it's that simple. I don't think any of its effects are inherently bad. They've really gotten away from the targeting active forwards that Lightning used to really rely on. There's not as many stuff that does that nowadays, where it's like it has to be an active forward. Again, maybe you'll see restrictions more like the cost. It's got to be 5 or less with the Opus 13 Odin, or it's got to be 3 or less with the new Ramu. So, which is probably, if you have to have restrictions on it, probably better to have that. There's just not a lot of cards in that give you value back, like let you draw cards back. Even Fire has gotten some cards like Moro, and there was the Onion Knight, where you can like discard cards, but then you get 2 back. So I'm not saying it's amazing, you can debate that, but it is some form of value. Whereas Lightning doesn't really have a lot of like great card draw. Again, Hooded Man was kind of that, but he had these caveats, yada yada yada. So that would be my guess. This is one I'd love to, if you in the comments below, if you have a different opinion or if you agree it's Lightning, and why specifically you think Lightning is as weak as it is. So Lightning would be my choice, looking at it in the frame of a mono element perspective. Soranoka asks, tips for someone who wants to get good at tournaments but hates mainstream decks. Good question. So try to recreate a tournament environment as best you can. Honestly, I don't think the deck you're playing matters as much as the pilot matters and how comfortable you are in a deck. So I've got a degree in theater. Every stage performance I've ever done, I get nerves when I do it, even though I've done it hundreds of times now. And I still get nerves when I do it, just because I don't know, that's just part of it, unfortunately. I wish it didn't happen, but it did. Maybe it's a good thing. Maybe it means I care. I don't know. Whatever. Anyway, so for when you go to a tournament, nerves can be a huge thing, especially if you're not used to them. Presumably you want to do well. And unfortunately, the way the tournaments are designed too, like, it's really important you do well early. If you lose 2 games and then win 5, that's way worse than if you win 5 games and then lose 2. So whatever you can do to recreate the tournament environment, I honestly think your deck doesn't matter. So for example, and I will do this in my testing group, play with a clock, because in a real tournament, you're timed. You have a 30-minute round. So get used to have someone hit the clock and then play with those time limit rules, because it's really easy when you're testing. Again, it's testing, so you want to, it's the time to make mistakes and experiment and even discuss strategies, and all that's good. But when you want that tournament feel, nope, 30 minutes, it starts, go. And really be mindful, even write it down if you have to. How much time do I take on each turn? And if, oh man, all my turns are taking 3 minutes plus, 4 minutes plus, I need to cut that down. Another thing, a lot of times when I will test, especially right before a tournament, I'll say, okay, tournament setting tonight, which means no takebacks. So if you make a mistake, you're stuck with that mistake. A lot of times in testing, again, I want my opponent to play to the best of their ability. So I'll say, no, go ahead and take that back, because I want to see what it would look like when you played the optimal choice. But in a tournament, unless you have an insanely generous opponent, they're not going to let you take a mistake back. So But get used to that. Don't just have that blindside you. Get used to that feeling of like, nope, you got to stick with it. Even if the moment you put the card down, you realize, oh no, I just saw this other line. I should have done this. Stick with it. Be like, all right, well, I got to stick with it, and learn from that feeling. So that's timing. That's no takebacks. If you wanted to put some kind of like soft noise, like pull up a YouTube video of crowd sounds or so, because you will, have people around you, and try to test with people around you too. Have people to your left and right, because you will be in kind of a crowded room doing that. Also, silly, simple stuff, but it matters. Remember to drink a lot of water, stay hydrated, go to the bathroom. snack on something if you're hungry. Whatever helps you just kind of like calm down and get through your plays and all of that. Yeah, I don't think you need to test with like meta decks specifically to work on those things. However, if you're going to a tournament and you want to be successful, yes, you should test against meta decks. You should, let's say you're playing Jank Deck 82 and Jank Deck 82, and so you say, okay, run, I expect to see a lot of Final Fantasy 13, or I expect to see a lot of Rainbow Warrior of Light. Test that against me. And if that deck stomps you 10 games in a row and it's not even close, okay, then that is a good moment for you to sit back and look, do I want to take Jank Deck 82, knowing I will very likely face these, and then are you okay getting stomped by them? Is there something you could change to not make it a stomp? So the more testing, the better. And in particular, here's another thing too. This one's kind of contradictory, but try not to make too many changes. If you get really comfortable with a list, you know exactly how many of each card are in there. When I used to play old Scions of the Seventh Dawn, I was so comfortable with that list. I knew the card count by heart. I could actually kind of start to predict which cards I would draw, like when I get really deep into the deck, because I'm like, okay, I know what I've seen. This is what's left. Here are the odds of it coming up. But if you're changing the deck constantly, then there's very likely I've had moments like that, and I've had testing partners moments like that. And they'll go search. Okay, where is da-da-da-da-da? Oh my gosh, it's not in here. I forgot I took it out. There's only one copy and it's already in damage. And that's another thing too. Breathe and double check. We saw that on the stream, that players would, because they're in a rush or they're panicked or, nerves, whatever it is, they would jump to a play. Like someone I remember searched for something and then had to fail to find because it wasn't in their deck, because they didn't realize it either had been hit into damage or their break zone or whatever. So take the time, go through those steps. Okay, I want to search for this card. Is it still in my deck? Let me check my break zone. Okay, it's not my break zone. It's not my damage. Yes, the card is in there. Go get it. So I think all those things could take you a long way, and you don't even have to play a meta deck to just get better at all that. So practice makes perfect. Lance, the Funky Town Hooligan, I just love that name so much, asks, Rudros Dono. Thank you, sir. Do you think we'll get a good shakeup with Opus 20, or will Soiree Rainbow meta persist to Opus 21? And alternatively, do you think Chaos Arc was intentional game design? So for the meta question, the deck is so strong, it shouldn't go anywhere. However, as we have seen with pretty much every Opus, a lot of times decks, despite nothing coming out to like directly hurt them, will just kind of disappear. So my instinct is to say that the deck will be just as strong as it was, again, assuming there's no bans or no cards that directly come out to counter it. But I also wouldn't be surprised for it to kind of disappear a little bit, just because that just seems to happen. But then again, Warrior of Light is something very, very unique as being a 4-cost. He is objectively the best attacker, defender in the game. So until something comes out that's 11k with all the keywords, or again, has even more keywords or something, like, you will not see a better attacker in the game until something else is printed for that. So, again, it's hard to imagine it disappearing, but I think that every Opus, and, look at Mono Wind. Mono Wind, which is still very good, hasn't shown up at all because I would assume people are specifically afraid of 13. So, of course, we don't know what all is going to come out in Opus 20. Maybe something come out that does punish Warrior of Light so hard that's like, nope, can't do that anymore. And then speaking of that, you kind of mentioned Chaos Arc was intentional game design. Do I think it was intentional game design? I can't say anything with any certainty. If I were to guess, it would be baffling if it was not intentional. Because when you're designing Arc came out in Opus 19, Chaos came out in Opus 16. And from what Rochelle told me a long time ago on that public video I did with her, is that they design sets they're like 3 sets out of where we're at. So I think when we were like playing in Opus 12, like Opus 15 was getting printed, or we were in Opus 13 and 15. So they're 2-3 sets ahead. So surely when you make a card like Arc and you say, I'm going to make this Dark Summon that is cheaper based on the highest cost Dark Summon forward you control. Well, especially with Light and Dark, where there's not a whole lot of those cards, surely you would look at every Dark forward and say, what are all of them? How cheap can it be? Obviously Neo X-Death is one of the more expensive ones. Sin is a very expensive one. Both Sins cost 9, right? Obviously the new Sin 2 costs 6. And surely you looked at that chaos and said, costs 11. Huh, it's totally free with this. I can't imagine you would write that text cheaper for the highest cost Dark Forward and then not even bother. Like, I don't even know what other Dark Forwards we have, but I'll just throw that out there. Like, so surely they looked at that. It would be so strange to think that, again, someone wrote, what's a good card idea? So Dark Summon, Break 2, costs really expensive. Ooh, and I'll just reduce it for your highest cost Dark Forward and not even check to see which of those are. That would be very, very strange if that was the case. So I have to believe, yes, it was intentional. So yeah, I do believe it was. And last but certainly not least, our last question for the week, but this one is quite in-depth. So it's a bit lengthy, so I'm going to read the whole thing just because, even though the questions are a little further down. But it was in response to my last video. Someone left this on YouTube when I was talking about adding trample into the game. They say something that was, the link between says something that wasn't mentioned in regards to trample and FF as opposed to Magic is the reason trample was made in MTG due to being able to multi-block and also general stat distribution. Combat is primarily defense favored. Hence, trample is made to offset that and allow attacking to be rewarding. FF is still aggressive favored even with combat mattering less, though I would argue that. As such, I don't believe trample would help. In addition, the problem with combat currently is just the rate of removal is so high, nothing sticks to get to combat, not that people are jumping. To add a question, do you have any cards that you have kept for sentimental value, or because they just look sweet? For example, my glass trophy from Winter Cup is Pride of Place, in addition also having a full art garland because it looks dope and I love the card. Finally, as a slightly harder question, what sort of formats are you currently playing in Magic the Gathering and what decks? What differences have you enjoyed? As an ex-Magic the Gathering, I left the game due to a number of the same reasons you have mentioned you stopped playing Final Fantasy. Is it possible we both just got fatigued with changes from the different card games over the years and found something new and fresh without the baggage? So it's very long, link between. Thank you for that question, and a very good one. I'll be very happy to talk about this. So first part about trample, again, that's kind of opinion. I'll leave that out. So the first question, how many cards you kept for sentimental value? You bet I have. Look, behold here. This is my favorite deck. See this old Opus 5 Alice, Oracle of Light. This was like the Opus 13, I think, deck tech I did. There's good old Ida. Oh, I love it. I miss this card. I think Papalimo is probably in there. There's the backup Cryo Louis Soix. But you get the idea. You know what deck this is. It's Scions. Hey, there's Monfilia. This was part of the reason I got into the game. I think that really drew me into the game. And not to say that the Scions are my favorite characters, because I like FF14. These are hardly my favorite FF characters, but it felt like a real tribal, a real job, that the way this was designed, that they all work together like they did in the game. So Alice giving them all haste, and then they all have, Ishtola and Ida have on attack triggers, but that works for them because they inherently have haste, so it was a good thing. So it made me feel like I was playing the game in the card game, and that was awesome. So absolutely, I would love to play this again. I'm sure it'd be absolutely terrible right now, especially with the amount of backup hate going on. And if this card isn't out there, the deck doesn't work. They've made new Scion cards, definitely pushed them in a different direction, but man, I would love an updated form of that. So yes, there is absolutely cards I have. It's just sentimental to me because it was really my first category, archetype, tribal, whatever you want to call it. So asking about Magic the Gathering, what sort of formats are you currently playing? So on Friday nights, I go to Friday Night Magic at a local shop, and we play Standard. I've drafted a few times. I don't really like draft, especially since I don't know all the Magic cards like I know the FF cards. So draft isn't very fun for me because I have to stop and sit there and read every card. I can't just easily crack the pack, go, well, this one's good, and then pass it on. So I don't really enjoy that. Plus, I'm not really collecting the cards. One of my friends actually pays for my entry, and any packs I win, I just give to him. I'm really just more there to hang out, play the game, and spend time with my buddies. That's the part I ultimately care about. But we play Standard on Friday nights, and I like Standard because, at least from what I've been told, again, I'm not a super Magic that I know all the lore, the history. Standard is like the slowest form of the game. Anything beyond that is very quick and very just crazy abilities. I accidentally stumbled into, I think, Historic on Arena once, and someone was playing Time Walk on me and kept taking the same turn over and over again for 2 mana. I was like, this is insanity. So yeah, Standard is what I currently play. What decks, particularly my two favorite ones right now, are what I call Stompy Green, which is just big green figures with this really cool enchantment, Tribute to the World Tree, and I think Thrun, the Breaker of Silence, is such a cool card, and I particularly like it against blue decks because they can't counter it, so he just comes in and boom. And then my favorite is what I call the Perfected Mind, which is Jace Planeswalker, Jace the Perfected Mind, the Planeswalker, the Turbo Mill deck, where you just, again, it's such a cool play style because it's so different from anything else I can do. I don't have to hit, I don't care how much life they have. They can life link till they're 100 life deep and I'll still beat them because I'm just taking their deck away. And for me, the only life that matters is one. As long as I have one, I'm fine. Nothing else matters. There's not even like creatures in that other than the Mindbreaker. So absolutely enjoy that deck. That is my 100% favorite one. So what differences have I enjoyed in the game? Yeah, that's a really, really great question. And you ask about the baggage. Is it possible we both just got fatigued with changes, and so we found something new? Yeah, that's 100% fair. I couldn't, there is no way for me to objectively say that, yeah, I feel da-da-da-da-da. Of course I have baggage with FF because I've been playing it for so long. I'm sure if I had been playing Magic for 4 or 5 years, that, yeah, it also would have seemed stale and FF would seem fresh. Absolutely 100%. However, I try to be as objective as a person as I can be. And so you asked what differences have I enjoyed. I don't think Magic is objectively a better game. I think there's some things it does better. I think FF does some things better. And, you know, sometimes I think we miss that nuance in our discussion with these games is my friends at Magic and they used to play FF, will just crap on FF, Magic's superior. But then I'll have FF people do the same thing. Nope, crap on Magic, FF superior. I can see the good in both. So, for example, let's talk about lands. That's got to be the most infamous thing about Magic, right? Lands, when they work, are awesome. When you put a land and then another land and you get to curve out the game, it's amazing. I think it's one of the best feelings in a card game when it goes on that perfect curve. However, if you've played Magic, you know you can get what they call mana screwed, which means you don't draw any lands. And when you don't draw any lands, you literally cannot play the game. Beyond frustrating. Or the opposite happens, what they call mana flooding, which is where you draw nothing but lands. And you also can't play the game because it doesn't matter, you have 8 mana to use if you have no cards to use it on. Both those feelings are terrible, and it's kind of baffling to me that for 30 years in, however long Magic's been around, they haven't come up with a better system than that. That they haven't, you know, whatever. I do think going first in Magic is so strong. Like, I often feel like I will lose matches simply because, oh, they got to go first. Okay, especially if you're like an aggro deck. Oh my gosh, it's huge. And again, in FF, you can technically respond, which is cool. I like that in FF. You know, if they go turn 1, here's this big card, you could immediately dump something to counter that card if you had it in hand. In Magic, you don't even have a land down. You can't do that. So that's what, that is a huge difference, right? And again, when the lands work in Magic, they feel awesome. When they don't, I'm very grateful for FF's system. I like that you can discard cards for CP so that, you know, even if you don't draw backups, you can still technically do something. Even if I'm a control deck or a late game setup deck, that's a more appropriate way to say it. If I'm a setup deck, my plan is to set up 5 backups, then go from there, and I don't draw any, that sucks, but at least I can play out a forward. At least I could still cast a summon potentially. Now, my buddy and I argue about this because he says, well, that's just an illusion, though, right? It gives you the illusion that you're doing something, when in reality, you're a setup deck. You're not going to win that game because you're not doing what your game plan is. So it feels better because you are actually playing cards onto the field, but it doesn't actually make a difference, which is a fair point. But it is also irrefutable that it does feel better, right? Because even if I go on to lose that game, it feels like I'm still doing something, which is great. However, in FF, because you can pitch cards from hand, you can have these explosive turn 1, turn 2 plays. You can go Hope, search out Vanille, search out Lightning. Next turn, go get you. You can go Kieran, turn 1. We saw this on stream in one of the European Championships. Kieran reveals Renoa, you know, flip the Kieran. Hits Madame Edel, who revives the Merald that was in the break zone. So on turn 1, your opponent hasn't even done anything, and you have 4 forwards of powers 9,000, 8,000, 8,000, and 7,000. And I don't actually like that. In Magic, that's impossible, and I like that turn 1, the most they can do is put out a 1 mana card. It's a play with fire to my face, or it's an evolving adaptive who's a 1/1. Like, I never have to worry about turn 1 them just going there, and then the game's just over because, oops, I just got blasted turn 1. Now, again, sometimes is that to Magic's detriment? Totally is. There are times when I have 4 cards that could help me in the game, but they all cost 4 mana, 5 mana, and it's turn 4 for me, so I can only cast a single one, and then that's my whole turn. And then I'm going to lose because of it, because the other person's like going wide or going aggressive against me. So there are times it's frustrating, sure. There are times I'm like, man, I wish it was like FF and I can throw my whole hand out there if I want to. But again, then the downside of that being that, but then you get those unga bunga turns, and then the game's just over before you get to do anything. So that's another difference. I will say this, and this should come as no surprise to anyone who knows me or watches this channel, is that I absolutely adore there being no such thing like EX bursts in Magic. And that in Magic, I can just attack. It's way safer to play things out in main phase 1, which is awesome, unlike an FF. But you can attack, and there's no just random surprise. They drew a card, they got a summon back, they killed you, whatever. It's funny. I could talk about EX bursts all day, not even just from a ranting perspective, but from a real in-depth discussion perspective, because what I don't like about them is that they're just these pure luck that you can't anticipate or know either player, etc. And some people have brought up the argument, well, isn't it the same as like drawing a card? Like, isn't drawing a card luck? Yeah, absolutely. Just like we mentioned with the lands, right? If I draw 5 lands, that's just terrible luck. But actually, maybe I'll save that for another time, because I feel like that's its own big discussion. So anyway, those are some of the differences I've enjoyed. Obviously, too, Magic, because it's been around for so long, has such an expanded design space. You have Planeswalkers, which are, I think, the coolest cards in the game. They feel impactful when they come down. I absolutely love them. You have enchantments, which has kind of felt like what Monsters should have been. And then you have sagas, and then these sagas every turn go through an effect, and some of them you can read ahead like you were really reading scrolls. And they've got these counter spells too, so I really do feel like a wizard or a planeswalker or a sorcerer, and I'm channeling and I'm casting, I'm creating all these things. So that's another difference I enjoyed. So again, I can recognize things in both games that I both like and dislike, and I would encourage anyone who has only played FF or only played Magic, and you're watching this video for some reason, go try out other games. I used to play Yu-Gi-Oh! And Pokemon too, and again, I don't really have much interest in playing those games now, but I can appreciate things about them. I liked that Pokemon did this. I liked that Yu-Gi-Oh! Did that. To me, that's being a true fan and wanting to see things do well, is look at them as objectively as you can. And it's okay to say, yeah, I wish FF did this differently. I wish Magic did that differently. So those are some of the key differences that I've definitely enjoyed. Obviously, Magic also has just the benefit of it's been around so long. Like, the scene in this shop is thriving. Like, FF in my heyday with my FF locals wishes it had this many people, and I really wish it did. It would be so cool to see as many people come out for a single night of Magic as they did for FF. And again, for FF, you had like one store on one night. For Magic, there are so many stores that do Friday Night Magic, and I've gone to 2 or 3 different ones, and they're all full. They're all full. That's cool. That's so cool. So yeah, I could go more. FF, I kind of like the way their cards feel a bit better, which is neat. I do appreciate that the FF, the art tends to be bigger. The art tends to take up the whole card, whereas Magic kind of has the art just the box. But the art is also really good in Magic too. I get the feeling of being a sorcerer, and I can understand what the art is trying to tell me. So yeah, I like both games. I can see the flaws in both games. So Magic is new to me because, like you said, it doesn't have all those years of baggage. So that very well could be part of the reason it is appealing to me. But I do genuinely think another part of the appealing is seeing expanded design and seeing things different and going, wow, that's so cool. I wish we did that. Also, glad FF doesn't do that, because I don't like that. So thank you for the question. Hope that was a thorough answer for you. And with that, we are done with this week's Q&A. Thank you so much for watching. comments, questions, leave all that below. Like and subscribe if you appreciate what you're watching. And yeah, look forward to that video coming out with Ghoul 02 later in the week. And thank you for everyone who watched the San Diego Cup. I know a lot of people just said they really enjoyed the commentary and all, so thank you. I'm grateful. I hope I can keep you informed and entertained and whatever else you're trying to get out of commentary. So thank you very much, and until next time, take care.